Hey there! I got myself some soda and a leek soup and I am ready for some coding. We will start by cleaning up our global script. We will add the root node as a reference in the script because this is very handy. And also we will add references to all our created servants here, just so we can access them from anywhere in our hierarchy, which is going to be very useful in the future. So in the global script, I added the Spring Manager variable, which will hold a reference to the Spring Manager root node, and another variable holding an array of servants that we are going to populate as soon as we create a servant. And in the Spring Manager root node, I attached a script, and in the ready function of that script, I am filling that Spring Manager variable in the global script with a reference to this node itself. So in the future, no matter where I am in my hierarchy, all I have to do to access the list of active servants or the root node is I type globals and, for example, active servants, and I got a reference to my array. So next we are going to do a little bit of cleanup to make the code easier to maintain. These constants for the packet scenes are currently nested in our hierarchy, and since these are strings with paths, we want them in our globals function so that we can change them if we ever need to rename some of these scripts. So I take this and put this in the globals function. And now I go back to the servant bar code, and obviously there's now an error here because this is now in the global script, and we fix this by just adding globals in front of it. So we also add another variable for the servant class. Because we are going to instantiate that class as well. Now the servant class itself is still completely empty. So at first we will create a static function that we can use to create new servants. So this is the static function, and we instantiate a new servant scene, and we append the new servant scene to our array we defined in our global script. Now the problem is that in Godot, all classes are actually nodes, and nodes need to be added to our scene tree. So we first need to attach the newly created class to our root node, and with this they get properly saved. Back into our root node, we can now use the add function to create new servants, and they should properly get added to the array. So let's create a debug and print out globals active servants and do a quick test. And after we pressed play, the nodes get displayed in our output console. Great! Remember when I said that autoloaders create racing conditions? Let's take a look what we did here. We assigned the root node to the Spring Manager global. That's cool. So that means if we now go into, say, the servant bar script and create a debug message here and reference the Spring Manager node, then this should properly show up, right? Let's press play. And this is all fine and dandy. We close this. But if we now look at the output, we will see that the node is actually not assigned yet. This is because in Godot, the ready function gets called when all child nodes inside that node have called the ready function first. So the root node ready function is the last thing that is going to be called in the entire scene tree as soon as you press play. So this actually gets assigned last and not first. So how do we change this? Well, the solution is quite simple, but you need to know it. So instead of calling the ready function to assign the global, we add enter tree, and enter tree gets called the moment the node gets initialized, which is the first thing that happens because the Spring manages the root node. So if we put this here in enter tree instead of ready, then if we press play, we will see that the Spring Manager node is properly assigned. That was kinda quirky, but I promise it only gets messier from here. Because the next thing I want to do is I want the add method to actually return the variable just created. So if I do this, I want this function to return the servant created. So this should be easy, right? I just go here, add a return value of type servant, and return this. Easy, easy. Well, it's not that easy. It actually gets so bad that the debugger crashes and I have to close this via the task manager. And when doing so, the application gets properly terminated and the error message disappears, so we don't even know what's up. But I'm gonna tell you what's up. I'm gonna be honest with you, the first time this happened, it took me a while to figure out why. I'm gonna show you. If we open up the servant node, the node, not the script, we will notice that there's no script attached to the node. So if we attach a script, then it works as expected. But if we press play now, we will see yet another error. Because until this line, this node is not added to the scene tree, so it can't know the globals function. And it can't know the root node it's going to be added to either, so we have two options now. The first option is we put the string holding the path to the servant node back into a variable here. But it doesn't even fix our problem because it still doesn't know the root node until it's added to the scene tree. So the better solution, in my opinion, is passing the globals as a parameter to this function and adding it this way. And now the servant script has access to both the root node and the remaining variables in the globals script. So if we run it now, then it works properly. Awesome. Maybe you noticed, but I already added a property to this class called element. And this goes back to what I said on my last video, that I want the parent class servant to reference the UI element as well. So let's make this a static type servant element and save. And we can now check if this property exists. And if there's an error now, then we know we did something wrong. But if there's no error, and there isn't, then we know, yes, this property exists. This is a class servant. It doesn't have a value yet because we haven't assigned it yet, but we will do this next. Okay, so let's take a look at the servant bar script again. And we will notice that this is a mess because the servant bar is not supposed to have control over these servant elements or even create those servant elements, because we want everything to be created and controlled from the servant class itself. We remove all this. We also remove the array up here because we no longer need it. And we'll do everything from the servant script. So back inside my servant script, we populate the element variable with a new servant element scene. And now the debug message should show us the expected element, and that's right, it does. Great. But we haven't added the element to the scene tree yet, so we go back to the Spring Manager script and add an export up here that holds the servant bar grid, this here. So let's go into the UI and drag and drop the grid up here so that we can reference this from the root node. And back here, we access the root node and then add child our element. And now it should properly show up. Awesome. And I just noticed that I haven't eaten my soup, and obviously it's cold now. Well, anyway, see you again next time. Bye-bye.